Sex should be easy, right? The reality is that sex is something you can absolutely get better at, with practice, with knowledge, and with the right mindset. But it all starts with understanding how your body actually works in the bedroom. I'm Dr. Thomas, physician and men's health and sexual wellness specialist. Welcome back to the Dr. Thomas podcast, your trusted resource for leveling up your health, your sex life, and your relationships through evidence-based medicine and real, honest conversations. I get questions about this topic every single day, from patients, from men sitting across from me in the clinic who are too embarrassed to bring it up with anyone else, men who are convinced they're broken. Maybe they feel like they're finishing too fast or taking too long. They're concerned about their anatomy, or they can't understand why their experience doesn't match what they're seeing in films or media. And every single time, I tell them the same thing: you are probably completely normal. So today, we're going deep into what I call Sexual Health 101. Everything you should have been taught, but almost certainly weren't. We're going to break down the sexual response cycle, how arousal actually works, how long things typically take, both in terms of arousal and sex itself. We're going to talk anatomy, including penis and vaginal size, because I know those questions are already in the back of your mind. And by the end of this episode, my goal is for you to walk away educated, empowered, and honestly, a little relieved. Here's what I've learned after years of clinical practice. Most sexual concerns are not medical problems. They are education gaps. And if you want to close that gap, I have a free resource available for you. Check out my free top 10 tips for more pleasure, grounded in science, at my website. All right, let's get into it. Let's start with the foundation. What is actually happening inside your body during sexual activity? And I want to be clear from the start, there is no single right way to experience sex. But there is a general framework that helps us understand what's going on biologically and psychologically. The sexual response cycle was first mapped by Masters and Johnson back in the 1960s. And while our scientific understanding has evolved significantly since then, this basic framework remains genuinely useful. They identified 4 phases: desire, arousal, orgasm, and resolution. Now here's something critically important that I want you to understand. Desire and arousal don't always follow that neat sequential order, and that mismatch is the source of enormous frustration for a huge number of people. I'll come back to this shortly, but let's break down each phase first. Phase 1, desire. Something you see, hear, feel, or smell triggers it. The urge to have sex. Desire can be spontaneous. When you're young, it's like a switch. You're ready. Or it can be responsive, meaning that as you begin to engage intimately with someone, desire starts to build and grow. And neither of those is superior to the other. They're just different patterns. I had a patient recently, a man in his late 40s, who came in genuinely worried. He said, "Doc, I just don't get that urge the way I used to. Something's wrong with me." But as I kept asking questions, he admitted that when he was actually with his partner, once things got going, he was very much engaged, very much enjoying himself. That is responsive desire. Completely normal, extremely common, especially in long-term relationships and as men age. Once I explained that to him, the weight visibly lifted off his shoulders. Phase 2, arousal. This is where the body begins to show its cards. For men with penises, blood rushes into the erectile tissue and creates an erection. The testicles draw upward closer to the body. The glands, or head, of the penis becomes more sensitive and may darken slightly in color. For women with vulvas, blood flow dramatically increases to the genital area, particularly the clitoris, which, by the way, is much larger than what you see externally. It extends deep into the pelvis and wraps around the vaginal canal, much like erectile tissue. The vaginal walls begin producing lubrication. The inner labia swell and deepen in color, and this entire process can take anywhere from a few seconds to over 20 minutes. Remember that number, 20 minutes. It matters. Now, for both men and women, heart rate increases, breathing deepens, and nipples become erect. Here's the key point men often miss. Arousal varies enormously between partners. Your partner may become physically aroused faster or slower than you do, and that is completely normal. There is wide biological variation in how quickly the body responds to stimulation. And just because a man develops an erection quickly doesn't mean he is fully ready for intercourse. Full arousal, mental and physical, takes time for everyone. Men are not machines. We are not wired to perform on demand. And the sooner we accept that and internalize it, the better our sexual experiences become. Phase 3. Orgasm. Most of you have experienced this. It is the peak release of built-up sexual tension, accompanied by rhythmic muscular contractions. For men, this usually coincides with ejaculation, with contractions occurring in the pelvic floor muscles and urethra. For women, contractions occur in the pelvic floor, uterus, and vaginal walls, typically at a rhythm of about every 0.8 seconds. Some people experience a single orgasm, some experience multiple, and some, up to 12% of women, have never experienced an orgasm at all. It's also worth noting that for men, orgasm and ejaculation are two separate physiological events that usually occur together, but don't have to. Some men ejaculate without fully experiencing the pleasurable sensation of orgasm. Understanding this distinction matters. Phase 4. Resolution. Your body returns to its baseline. This is where we talk about the refractory period, the window of time during which it becomes very difficult or impossible to become aroused again. For men, this period can range from about 10 minutes when you're young to several hours or even a full day as you get older. For women, many don't experience a clearly defined refractory period, which is part of why multiple orgasms tend to be more common among women, though the science here is still evolving. Now, let's talk about timing, because this is where the most damaging misconceptions live. We are constantly bombarded with unrealistic expectations from media, from adult films, from locker room mythology, and most of us never received any honest education about what's actually normal. Let's start with arousal timing. For men, visible arousal, an erection, can happen within 30 seconds to a couple of minutes of stimulation. But, and I want to be very clear here, that does not mean a man is ready for intercourse. Mental arousal takes longer, and it matters enormously. Men, we need to stop treating ourselves like machines. We're not robots. Our experience is nuanced. For women, physical arousal typically takes significantly longer. Research consistently shows it can take 4 to 20 minutes for full lubrication and engorgement to occur. During that time, the vagina also lengthens and widens, a process called vaginal tenting, which prepares it to comfortably accommodate penetration. If that preparation time isn't honored, sex becomes uncomfortable or painful, and that is entirely preventable. I'll share something from my clinical experience. I had a couple come in, the male partner was frustrated, the female partner was withdrawn. When I dug into it, the issue was simple. They weren't spending enough time on arousal before penetration. She felt like something was wrong with her because it took a long time to get ready. He felt rejected because she didn't seem enthusiastic. But the real problem? Nobody had ever told them the biology. Once I explained that her body literally needed more time to prepare and that this was normal and healthy, everything shifted. They started investing in foreplay. She stopped feeling broken. He felt like a better partner. They had better sex. That's what education does. Now let's talk about how long sex actually lasts, because this is another area full of myths. The research methodology here is interesting. Female partners use stopwatches to time penetration from start to ejaculation. In a study of over 500 couples worldwide, the average time for penetrative intercourse was 4 minutes. The range went from under a minute to over 30 minutes, but the majority of couples fell between 3 and 13 minutes. That's it, gentlemen. The movies are lying to you. This study only measured penetration, not total sexual activity. When you factor in foreplay and other forms of intimacy, the typical encounter lasts more like 15 to 30 minutes. But here's the bottom line. Whether penetrative sex lasts 2 minutes or 20 minutes, you are within the normal range. What matters is whether both partners are satisfied. I've had men come in convinced they had premature ejaculation because they lasted 7 minutes. 7 minutes. That's above average. And on the other end, I've seen men worried because they were lasting too long, causing discomfort for their partner due to friction. In both cases, the measure that matters is mutual satisfaction, not comparison to some imaginary benchmark. Here's the critical gap, though. Women require an average of 12 to 14 minutes of stimulation to reach orgasm. Compare that to 4 minutes of penetration. If sex is structured exclusively around male pleasure, there is a significant probability that the female partner will not orgasm. And while not reaching orgasm doesn't mean the experience was without value, the journey matters enormously. We should at least understand the biology so we can make informed choices about how we approach intimacy. Now let's shift to anatomy, because patients ask about this constantly, and the misinformation is rampant. Starting with penis size, the average erect penis length is between 1 and 6 inches. Across multiple global studies, the normal range spans roughly 3 to 8 inches. Following a standard bell curve, the vast majority of men are clustered right around that 4-inch average. An 8-inch penis is genuinely rare. So is a 3-inch penis. But when researchers ask men to estimate the average size, the guesses are almost always inflated, because the reference points most men have are adult films, where the performers are specifically selected for being statistical outliers. I've had men in my office, well above average in size, consumed by anxiety about whether they measure up. That anxiety was affecting their confidence, their relationships, their willingness to be intimate. This is why data matters. Know the facts. They are more reassuring than you think. Now let's talk about girth, because that's arguably more relevant than length. The average erect circumference is about 5 to 5 inches, with a normal range of 5 to 5 inches. Why does girth matter? Because greater girth provides more lateral pressure, which means more stimulation to the internal legs of the clitoris. Understanding the anatomy helps you understand the experience. And where does that penis go? Into the vaginal canal, which also has an average resting depth of about 3 to 4 inches, but that changes dramatically during arousal. With proper arousal and the tenting process I described earlier, the vagina can expand to accommodate most anatomy comfortably. The body is designed for this, which is exactly why rushing past arousal is such a disservice to both partners. The external vulva varies enormously from person to person. The labia can be long or short, symmetric or asymmetric, lighter or darker in color. And just like men are often conditioned to feel inadequate about their size by media that isn't representative, women are often conditioned to feel insecure about their labia by adult films that specifically select anatomy suited to specific camera angles, not anatomy representative of the full human range. It's all normal. And helping the women in our lives understand that is part of being an informed, supportive partner. Now I want to address one of the most persistent myths I encounter about vaginal looseness. The idea that a woman becomes loose from having multiple sexual partners is simply medically incorrect. Think about it logically. If someone has been in a monogamous relationship and had sex thousands of times, no one makes that accusation. But if someone has had many partners over their lifetime, suddenly there's judgment. The truth is that the vaginal canal is extraordinarily elastic. We are talking about a structure that is capable of passing a human infant through it and then returning to its prior state. The number of sexual partners has no meaningful impact on vaginal tone. What does affect it? The pelvic floor musculature. Weakening of those muscles from childbirth, neurological conditions, genetics, or age is what affects vaginal tone. I recently saw a patient whose wife had experienced significant pelvic floor changes despite only small deliveries. Why? Family history. Her mother had the same issue, her grandmother before her. There was likely a connective tissue predisposition at play. That is the science, not the mythology. Similarly, tightness is not a virtue. A chronically tight pelvic floor indicates dysfunction, not strength. Painful intercourse is never something a woman should have to accept as normal. Healthy pelvic floor function means the ability to both engage and relax the muscles, and sex should never be painful. Here's the overarching message, gentlemen. Having great sex is not about anatomical dimensions. It's about communication, timing, arousal, and genuine attentiveness to your partner's experience. I have seen couples with every conceivable anatomical combination build genuinely satisfying, deeply connected sexual relationships. In fact, we once spoke to the man with the largest medically verified penis in the world on this podcast, and his experience was nothing like what you'd expect. Size alone does not determine satisfaction. Now let me address the most damaging myths I hear in clinical practice, because these myths create unnecessary suffering and the facts are liberating. Myth 1. Real orgasms only come from penetration. Completely false. The clitoris is the most reliable route to female orgasm, and it doesn't require penetration to be stimulated. The clitoris contains approximately 10,000 nerve endings. That's more than the head of the penis. It is the only organ in the entire human body whose sole biological purpose is pleasure. Stimulating the clitoris in the way your partner enjoys is the most evidence-based approach to helping her reach orgasm. Ask her. She will appreciate that you care enough to ask. Myth 2. Good sex should happen naturally, without effort. This is the myth that drives me the most professionally insane. Good sex is a skill. Just like any other skill, fitness, communication, leadership, it requires practice, education, and refinement over time. There is nothing wrong with using lubricant, trying new techniques, reading about sexual health, or actively working to understand your partner's responses. In fact, the couples who do that work consistently report higher satisfaction. You're not patching a broken relationship by working on your sex life. You're investing in one of the most meaningful forms of human connection. Myth 3. You and your partner should always want sex with the same frequency. This is biologically impossible. Libido varies between individuals and fluctuates constantly within the same person, depending on hormones, stress levels, relationship satisfaction, medications, sleep, and overall health. There is no universal correct frequency. But I do encourage regularity in intimacy, because the research is clear that sexual connection is tied to longevity, mental health, and relationship quality. If you and your partner are experiencing a significant mismatch in drive, talk about it. Find ways to stay connected physically and emotionally, even outside of sex itself. Many men default to sex as their only form of physical intimacy. Building other forms of connection actually enhances desire over time. Myth 4. Desire should always be spontaneous. I've touched on this throughout this episode, and I want to drive it home. Responsive desire, where arousal precedes desire, is completely normal and extremely common, particularly for people in long-term relationships and as we age. Think of it like going to the gym. You might not feel motivated before you get there, but once you're in the middle of it, you're glad you came. The same principle applies. You don't need to start with desire. You need to create the conditions for arousal, and desire often follows. And as a partner, your job is to help cultivate an environment, emotional safety, connection, playfulness, patience, where desire can emerge naturally throughout the day, not just in the bedroom. And myth 5, pain during sex is normal. Let me be unambiguous. Pain during sex is never normal. The first time may involve some discomfort due to anxiety or insufficient lubrication, but persistent, recurring pain is a symptom that needs clinical evaluation. If your partner is experiencing pain during intercourse, it is not something she should endure. Don't tell her to relax and have a glass of wine. That's not medicine. Get her to a clinician who specializes in sexual health and pelvic medicine. There are effective treatments. Pain is not something either partner should accept as inevitable. Let me close with practical steps you can implement starting today. Step 1. Reframe the question. Stop asking, "Am I normal?" Start asking, "Am I healthy? Am I satisfied? Is my partner satisfied?" Normal is a statistical range, and the range is enormous. What matters is your well-being and the quality of your connection, not comparison to some manufactured standard. Step 2. Communicate. I know, men don't love this advice, but here's the thing. Communication is the highest leverage tool you have for improving your sex life. Talk to your partner about what feels good, what doesn't, what you're curious about trying, what's been on your mind. Start small if you need to. Maybe you bring up something interesting you heard on this podcast. "Hey, I learned something fascinating today. Can I share it with you?" Use that as the opening. Build the habit. Communication builds trust, and trust builds desire. Step 3. Focus on the journey, not just the destination. Men are often goal-oriented. We want to get to the orgasm. And orgasms are great, no argument there. But the build-up, the connection, the physical closeness and presence before orgasm, that's where the real depth of sexual experience lives. Be present. Be attentive. Be curious about your partner's responses. The orgasm will take care of itself when you invest in the journey. Step 4. If you are experiencing genuine distress, pain, dysfunction, significant anxiety about your sexual health that's affecting your relationships and quality of life, Don't white-knuckle it in silence. Talk to a physician who specializes in sexual medicine or work with a sex therapist. In most cases, once we identify what's actually going on, treatment is highly effective. You don't have to live with this. And step 5, keep learning. Sexual education doesn't end with one podcast episode. Subscribe to this show. Keep reading. Keep asking questions. The investment in understanding your own body and your partner's pays dividends for decades. Here's your homework for this week. Have one conversation about sexual health. With your partner, if you can. With a close friend if you're not there yet. Or at a minimum, sit down and write in a journal. What did you learn today that challenged something you believed before? What do you want to understand better? That reflection alone moves the needle. As we close, I want to leave you with this. Your sexual experience is yours. It doesn't have to match anyone else's to be valid, healthy, and deeply satisfying. The range of normal is far wider than most men realize. And once you understand that, a significant amount of unnecessary anxiety disappears. Communication and education are the most powerful tools you have. And your body, your experience, your story, those belong to you. If this episode gave you something valuable, share it with someone who could use it. Sexual health education is something every person deserves, and most of us never properly received. Take care of yourself, because you are absolutely worth it.